Welcome to Managing Love Intelligently. I'm Jason.
And I'm Stephen Ng, marriage and family therapist.
Yeah, that's right. And
wait a minute, was that too exuberant?
That was like no, I like that. It's like a superhero. It always reminds me of.
Bam!
It's like coming to save the day. So today we're talking about a article actually that you sent me that is called "Going Boy Sober is About More Than Celibacy." That's the title of the article.
Yes.
And
it wasn't just because I think you desperately needed it. It was because I thought it was really intriguing to look at one of the answers that young women in this country are considering as they try to work out how to do intimacy and how to avoid some of the mistakes of the past.
Yeah, and that article was in the Washington Post, and it was written by a woman named Anne Branigin. And the summary of it that they put on top says, young people are reexamining their relationships with sex and dating amid toxic online dating culture and an increasingly volatile gender divide. Oof. So kind of a mouthful, but toxic online dating, I feel like you could relate to that one. Because you don't like
the more I talk to clients about their online dating experiences, the more horrified I am at the shit show that is considered normal by so many people. Like, this is how we meet people. This is the normal way of doing it, the normal way of evaluating them. You find a willing victim who's apparently going to hang out with you.
Well, they both match. They both have to swipe right. So.
Yes, you have to have that very valuable connection. And then after that, it's a matter of a binary, I accept you, I don't accept you, which seems... and it's just a horrible beginning, but that's just me. I think it's a horrible beginning.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go through this article and examine it. I'm going to do, if you've listened to episodes like this before, we have article episodes sometimes where we kind of read through certain things and talk about the topics in relation to managing love intelligently.
Well, why did the article grab you anyway?
I thought it was interesting. Well, online dating was one of those things. Since talking to you, it seemed like maybe I should not do online dating anymore. And maybe I should actually try to just live my life and talk to people normally, like get a spine and approach a woman and ask her out like I should have been doing many, many years ago.
Like bold men of old.
Yeah. Like I've avoided, it's like I avoided it for most of my life. For one, because I had a girlfriend in high school and didn't really have to do it. And then in college, I had a girlfriend, same one. So I didn't really gain any social skills. And then she dumped me. And then I lost all my social skills, even worse than they already were.
They atrophied?
Well, I felt like I sucked as a human.
Oh my God.
So I wasn't worthy of anything. So then I lived in that for years. And then I got another girlfriend. And then I went to school for grad school when I was in my 30s, and then got another girlfriend. And then but I wasn't approaching women and asking them out. I got
So high school, college, and grad school, those are your dating apps.
Yeah. Well, once online dating came out when I was in my 20s, I was like, oh, thank God I don't have to approach anyone. So I would just go up and talk to people.
I think millions of young men feel like you do. And I think largely because it's, just that very genuine risk of rejection that goes on over and over. There was one social scientist who observed that there were over 100 steps toward any intimate relationships, and the male was expected to initiate each and every one of those steps.
Yeah.
So at each and every step, you risk rejection. And it's a little bit daunting, I think.
Yeah. But now, since I know about rejection, it's a good thing. And we talked about how if somebody rejects me, it's great, because that means that she's not going to be the woman that's for me. And that's fine. And I don't want someone who's not crazy about me and #1 fan club. So all the stuff that you talk about. And I've also been in a relationship where somebody didn't want to be with me and stayed, and that was not good. So it's reject me, do it quick. Let's get this over with. It'll take me a
Band-Aid off.
Yeah. It takes, a day or so to recover from it, depending. But usually it's not that bad. If it's straight up, when you're not feeling it, just end it.
Yeah.
So So that resonated with me. And then also just the state I'm in my life as far as like dating goes. I went on like a 2-year dating thing after my last relationship and dated multiple people and had that whole experience dating people without the intention of getting into a relationship because I was still doing the recovery and intentional debriefing and also not wanting to get in that habit of just getting into another relationship right away. So, but now it's like work wise, trying to figure out things with work as far as like writing goes, reexamining that relationship as far as I'm putting out, trying to get a sketch comedy book published. So sending out to agents and then finishing a novel. So those two alone on top of this work here, on top of the work at the theater that I do with the improv and sketch comedy writing, I'm like, I don't really have time to commit to anybody right now. So I'm going girl sober, as they call it, which we'll get into.
Okay. All right. I'm looking forward to hearing about that.
So, the first thing this article starts with, which I don't know, maybe the author just does this because everybody is into like Hollywood and celebrities. It's like kind of sometimes how the zeitgeist moves. It's like, what are the celebrities wearing, doing, blah, blah, blah. So it starts by saying, let's talk about not having sex. And then the next paragraph says, some of our hottest celebs are not doing it. So that kind of, I thought was interesting how just the idea of celebrities, like if they're not doing it, that makes it kind of okay. Like, I don't know what you're.
Well, like it, yeah. Anytime you have a leader in the social community who is modeling a behavior, suddenly that behavior becomes far more acceptable. But what I find intriguing is that it's kind of sexy, if I can say that, for someone to bring up sex, but in such a neutral way or even a disdainful way. Like, yeah, I'm not. I've thought about sex a lot and decided absolutely not. And so I'm saying no to sex. And suddenly, I mean, it's really different from someone who's dressing as if, or talking as if, behaving as if that it's all about sex. And to have somebody do just the opposite is refreshing. And it's truly different. And also, it's kind of an opening for the right person to really have an entree into getting to know somebody without that pressure.
Yeah. I think that's all true. And it's kind of crazy that, I mean, it's like you want people to be having sex, I think sometimes, but then it's like, well, that's been going on for generations and generations, kind of unconsciously. And these people are just having sex and getting into relationships and getting divorced within their 30s. And maybe it's good that young people are kind of taking a break and actually like thinking more deeply about it before rushing into
it makes
that.
It more intentional, right?
Yeah.
And so instead of, getting that starter marriage up and running when you're in your 20s and then crashing and burning in your early 30s, to end up just saying, no, I'm going to deliberately slow my roll and just go forward with getting to know somebody or a lot of somebody's in a much more intentional way. I like that.
Yeah. And so let's see here. Where does it say? But anyways, yeah, the name Boy Sober. So that is kind of like a Gen Z thing. It sounds like that was the rebrand. And they say going boy sober is about a lot more than abstaining from sex. The people who have done it say, nor is it about assigning men the blame for the soul-sucking horrors of modern dating. So I thought that was kind of good because I think it's really admirable. They're abstaining from sex and they're also, though, not assigning blame, because I feel like a lot of times blame is involved with.
And it's not just, as the article says, it's not merely abstaining from sex. It's something larger and more intentional than that, because theoretically every nun in America has abstained from sex, but I'm not sure that it has the same intention as what this writer is talking about.
Yeah, no, not at all. So this is kind of interesting. They say by channeling the increasingly popular language of sobriety and its association with wellness and self-help, Boy Sober helps people assess why they seek out certain kinds of partners or fall into certain kinds of behaviors, its adopters say.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Oh, well, that to me, I just thought it was kind of interesting how that's kind of like how they're using the language, like sobriety. And it's like kind of a clearing, kind of a.
I'm so jaded with my career as a therapist, having heard the language of sobriety for the last 50 years. It just kind of bypassed me completely. But yeah, I see your point.
Yeah, it's just like I thought applying that to dating was kind of like a interesting way of doing it. And then they say it's about reprioritizing your time and attention away from endless swiping and non-committal DMs and towards activities that are more fulfilling. And that to me was right up speaking the language of creating a life worth living.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like it. And so it'd be a focus on friendships, a focus on your personal interests, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's all to the good. So I get to focus on the important business of becoming the grown-up I was meant to be, and defining myself on my own terms rather than so driven by my neediness that I have to get anyone in my life, and then they get to define me.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to work out a lot better for millions of people.
Well, there are also two other things that are associated with it as well. One of them say that Boy Sober is about taking accountability for your own bad behavior.
Yeah, and I'm curious what to you bad behavior means in that situation, because we're not talking about having sex.
No, I think that I thought that was kind of vague in a way, like in the article. Sorry, Anne, but or it's open to interpretation. But I think taking accountability for maybe, like, I don't know if bad's the right word. I mean, because I'm trying to get away from that myself. But I think it's about just taking ownership for maybe ghosting people or not treating people kindly, or like just not treating people as more like humanely as you can, kind of just like following your own kind of needs in a way that makes you more of a disconnected person.
I was looking at it more internally, like getting away from your own pathological level of neediness into something that's healthier and more simply human.
Yeah.
The way you define it, I think makes a lot of sense. So I can see why the vagueness of the expression kind of lends itself to a lot of people examining what they think really needs work in their life. Yeah,
that's how I agree. I think it's a kind of like how it's open like that. They also say in the article, or Anne says, it's about healing your relationship to relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. And that for me, in counselor speak, that probably would be something like examining irrational beliefs about relationships, but calling the relationship to relationships by that language, I think also opens up a world of feelings and goals and all the rest of it. So I think it's pretty clever actually, and very helpful.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting that people that at this young of age are looking to heal some of these things so early on in their life. That kind of stuck out to me as well.
Well, we're both so enthusiastic about this article. Do we need to say we are not shilling for the WAPO? But I do appreciate that newspaper, and I read it all the time. And but I think this is the kind of article that if you were to find it online, I think there are a lot of people in all of our lives who would benefit from just considering the idea, whether they act on it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm not trying to, there are some things maybe I think within it that I don't agree with 100%, but it's also, I don't know, you go through your life and like we do this podcast to teach people maybe some things that they could avoid so they don't have to go through as much pain. And it's like, you could either say this pain is unavoidable, or there may be ways to not have it be as detrimental. And I know in like my 20s, the language of healing or relationships wasn't even in my vocabulary. And I think if you heal that stuff earlier on and kind of become an adult earlier on, I think that improves the relationships, that improves the sex. I mean, it's like 20-year-olds could be having like a lot better sex probably if they like were more aware and intentional and
your true intentions
did some healing. Well, that's what it's all about. No, not that, but it's a part of it. But it's a thing that people complain about, not complain, or they seem dissatisfied by, and it's because people, I think, are not really aware. They're kind of living unconsciously, and they're kind of going through the motions, especially in your 20s. I know I was.
Well, for me, whether I agreed with Anne or didn't agree with Anne, what I could appreciate, and I do agree with her on a lot of the article, what I do appreciate is giving people language to discuss and observe what's going on in their lives that they did not have before, to consider different options that were never really pondered previously. And I'm reminded of that quote from Wittgenstein that I think Ludwig Wittgenstein, in case anybody's got that confused with another Wittgenstein, the philosopher who said, if I don't have the words to describe a thing, then I cannot understand that thing.
Yeah.
So having the words to begin talking about relationships and growing my vocabulary and being able to accept different concepts leads to a much more sophisticated and refined process for me to experience healing and to consider the outcomes of my relationship decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that that's ultimately beneficial. And there was something I heard somewhere or read somewhere saying something like, life doesn't have to be painful. Like, you don't have to wait for the pain to happen to change. There was some guy mentioned that. I can't think of his name right now, but he said that.
It sure wasn't me, because I've had to have extreme pain before I could consider, hey, I might be wrong about this.
Yeah. Me too. So,
but you don't have to have extreme pain. One way I heard a recovering alcoholic say it was that he didn't have to hit the same bottom as his recovery went forward. He was talking about alcohol recovery, and he said his bottom had risen. Okay. And apart from a confusing moment where I was thinking of his anatomy, to just really ponder that, from a phenomenological point of view or developmental point of view, that no, I don't have to wait until I've spent years of my life, falling asleep in my own vomit repeatedly. I don't have to continue having extreme medical problems before I can ponder a new way of life or the possibility I've made a mistake. I could just be really uncomfortable for a day. Yeah. And that might be enough, or even uncomfortable for an hour or even a few minutes before I decide, hey, this just isn't working for me. I need to come up with something else. And then to talk to other people about it, or to read an article like this, I think it's just very liberating when we don't have to have extreme pain, because then we're so emotionally afflicted that it's really hard to think clearly. Mm-hmm. But if I can allow my bottom to rise with continued rational thinking and sane living, then I become ever more discriminating and more discerning, and actually ultimately more successful in my navigating the rocky shoals of social life.
Yeah, I think you just came up with another bit of your relationship technology.
I'll let you tell me about
rise. Allow your bottom to rise. Oh. Something like that. I mean, in a catchier phrase, but that idea of that your rock bottom has risen. Yes. And then, like you said, getting in a relationship standpoint where you're doing that, you're rising it so much where you're not waiting a month, 6 months, a year, 10 years. You're now doing it to a day, or then you get even better to minutes. It's like that to me seems like you're narrowing that gap more and more and more. So then if something does come up, you address it, you get it resolved, and you get back on the happy train.
Yeah, I think raising my bottom actually is easily applicable to something as clear-cut as, say, abuse in a relationship. I don't have to wait until my partner is actually physically hitting me and been hitting me for years and years before I say, hey, I think we have a problem here. I can get it much shorter than that, and eventually get to the point, through personal growth, where I simply say, no abuse is okay. And we've talked about that at length, but I think it also applies to things like, sexual compatibility, any kind of mutual shared goals. I might have been so needy in the past that I didn't need any mutual goals or shared compatibility. But as time goes by, I start humbly realizing, oh yeah, I do have needs. And if I don't get those needs met, the outcome is going to be very bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ugly.
We both know, ugly. We both know from experience on that one.
But not experience together. I just want to make that clear to the audience.
Yes. Separate. I don't even know if I was alive when you were experiencing yours.
Hey, I'm not that old.
Yeah. So Hope Woodward is her sister coined the term boy sober. So just to give her some credit.
How about giving her sister's name?
I know it doesn't say, but it says her sister who coined the term boy sober, but it doesn't say her name. So
okay.
Hope's sister come
on, Hope. Open up a little bit. Yeah. Give your sister some credit here.
So Hope Woodward, who created the boy sober term, or her sister who coined it, she says within the article, she said that she thought she was ruining her own life with her sex and dating habits. And she was talking about this with her sister who had coined the term boy sober. And the idea of the sobriety, again, getting back to that, she said it brought it to her mind the year in which she gave up drinking. And then she said when she gave up drinking that it changed her life. It was the first time I did an open mic. It was the first time I was really able to get to know myself.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like that idea of getting sober and getting clear and getting intentional. And then again, like we talked about with creating a life worth living and probably even growing up as well, like really taking time to get to know yourself, I think is the important thing for me there.
Well, spiritually, I mean, down through millennia, those who are wishing to grow often turn to some form of self-denial or deprivation, like fasting, or even going without sleep and devoting themselves to meditation or prayer. And it also included sexual self-denial. Mm-hmm. And in this case, I just think these are all techniques for kind of clearing one's head a bit and considering things from a different perspective without having to die and be reborn into some other person's body. It's a little bit like, I think, what having a sense of humor does for us. If we have a sense of humor, we often get that knock on the side of the head and see the comedy in something that was formerly viewed as excruciatingly painful. And now we find ourselves laughing at it. Obviously, we've taken on a different perspective. And to go boy sober, or in your case, girl sober, I think does have that same end result.
Yeah.
Where I'm really looking at things from this very different perspective, where I'm feeling what I was feeling before, but instead of impulsively or compulsively acting on it, now I'm mindfully simply observing myself. And that then my observing ego is growing and I feel more empowered because I actually know my own process and I can start discriminating from some of those maladaptive patterns, like impulsively jumping into a commitment and just being more mindful, more thoughtful as I get to know others and give myself some room to breathe and enjoy the process a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think that it also helps you work through that neediness thing that's always kind of looming in the back of your mind.
Well, to get to a point, ideally, where I grow truly comfortable with my own company and I can enjoy myself, whether I'm with somebody or not, that I have so many interests and so much going on that I feel free of that kind of compulsive neediness that drives me into the arms of a new relationship, when really it would be better if I just, as you say, focused on developing a life worth living.
But I will say to listeners, it's easier. It's like all this stuff I think is easier said than done. Like, how long do you think it takes to get to that point?
A couple of weeks.
Yeah, right. Couple of weeks.
Look, I think
just what do you have a ballpark or an idea?
No, I really don't, because and then what's hard about that is we're all different. Mm-hmm. We all have different intellects and emotional resiliency, And we also all have different upbringing. So some parents are going to do a wonderful job of equipping their children to meet life as adults. And most parents, and I would say including me, are much more uneven in that. We make sure our kids go to school and have enough to eat and all that. But it's not like I was engaged in teaching intimacy skills to my children so that they knew how to evaluate boys better or to enjoy a date, in a way that's truly healthy and uplifting. So I think
you weren't teaching these things.
I don't think I did any kind of teaching because it really wasn't. Number one, I didn't even know myself what I would be teaching. Number two, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
That what I want, because people who listen to these podcasts hear me complain about sex education in America because basically it's a biology lesson in anatomy and physiology with a little bit of public health regarding STIs and pregnancy, sure. But then there's no context, particularly a human context, which would be known by most of us as a human relationship. So is mate selection a part of human sexuality? I think it is. And part of mate selection, I think part of mate selection is becoming the person who can be mindfully choosing rather than compulsively driven into a relationship. So sex education is really, I think, in America needing to be much more holistic than it is, and also much longer than the typical day or two that is devoted to it at different grades. I think it really needs to be at least as important as things like driver's ed for a whole semester. Are you kidding me? I think a whole semester, or even a whole year spent on relationships 101 or the ins and outs of intimacy. And I think that would help young people, and I think they would be fascinated. We don't even teach young people about something as elemental as just making sure relationships are safe. So that, which would involve teaching about domestic violence and emotional abuse. And if we can't even do that, I mean, really, obviously, our whole culture is falling down on the job of preparing the next generation to have happy, healthy lives.
Yeah. And you think that we should be doing that, obviously.
I do. And it's, something I hope I live to see before I die, but just in case I don't, I'm passing the mantle on to you, Jason.
Thank you.
This happen. Or I will haunt you from the grave.
I know. That's my fear. But there are times, like, say, or let me go back to this really quick. So that idea, say people did have that. What do you think that would do for like society? I guess like having an education system where people are learning this stuff very early on. Do you think their just mental health would be stronger? Do you think that their families would be like? Do you just think
it would be an epic transformation in American culture? It would be an enormous step up in the evolution of human social life. It would be so powerful in terms of helping women feel safer and enjoy their full potential more. But for those of us who have boys in our family we care about, I think it would help boys to experience so much happiness in their lives if they just knew a few things, but they knew them thoroughly, not just cognitively, but emotionally and behaviorally, so that they could identify what is abuse, what is not abuse. And that would be just the beginning. I think an intentional interview, the whole week or two on that would be really vital.
Yeah.
And all of it collectively would make this nation of ours a far more intellectually and psychologically sophisticated place, where we wouldn't likely have politicians who can get away with being abusive of minorities, including women, of course. But in recent years, we've all seen a lot of name calling and crazy abuse while on the campaign trail, and to learn to have an ethos that disdains such behavior, I think would really elevate the political discourse in this country to where we could really talk about ideas rather than simply attacking individuals.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. All that stuff is how I envision it too, like in my head for the most part.
Yeah, that's why
and better sex. I mean, which is your main master plan that I
I think that's your main master plan, but I think it's true. Of course, it would result in better sex because sex between two awakened people who are in a relationship based on equality with no abuse, of course the sex is going to be better. Yeah. And I mean, it kind of goes without saying, I suppose, but all joking aside, I think it would transform family life in America and help us to raise healthier children. And frankly, I don't even see a political angle here where conservatives or liberals would be put off by simply teaching children how to evaluate others for potential relationships. I don't see how there's a downside or a partisan gulf between points of view on that. It's a lot less incendiary, I think, than just the idea of talking about penises and vaginas in a regular sex ed class.
Yeah, totally. So going back to the article, I want to talk about the rules of Boy Sober, which I know how you like rules or maybe don't like rules, because
I'm an algorithm addict. I am. I accept that.
So the rules of this, if you're interested in it, and you could be whatever, you could be boy sober, girl sober, whatever sober, but the rules that are set forth according to the article are: number 1, no dating apps.
Oh,
so that's,
God, I love
you
her.
love that. Number 2, no dates.
What?
Number 3, no exes.
What does that mean? No exes?
I think that means like falling back on an ex, probably maybe during those lonely times where you're feeling that neediness creep in, and it's easy to kind of hit up an ex in a text.
We are going to review these rules, right?
We can, yeah. And then no hookups, which is probably good for you. And then a later addendum: self-pleasure is fine.
And that was added out of desperation, I suppose.
That was probably just like, you got to have some sort of pleasure in your life,
some sort of sexual release.
Yeah. So So first one, no dating apps. That's a no-brainer.
Well, that's, for me, that's like the rule that says, no bars filled with drunk people. So those, to me, that's just common sense. And I would agree with that, because it's such a superficial way of getting to know people, even at the earliest, lowest levels. And we could all do more simply by doing those activities that are integral to developing a life worth living. If you want to go ballroom dancing with some future date, go take a ballroom dancing class. And what a surprise. You're going to meet men and women who love ballroom dancing and who want to learn how to do it. And
you'll need a partner.
Yeah. Well, no, you don't need one, because if you show up,
well, they'll have one for you.
Yeah, because they typically rotate, around in a circle where you change partners with every dance. And I think that it's such a, I mean, that's merely one example. You might as well, if you prefer rock climbing to dancing for whatever reason, then take one of those classes. And again, you'll be meeting men and women who like that activity, or at least want to investigate it. And you'll have this relationship with others in the class that is really a kind of a triune relationship, where there's this third object, this idea of rock climbing and going into nature, or ballroom dancing, and how you're relating to the whole notion. And it creates a really easy environment for getting to know people, because we're all comfortable talking about the activity that we all signed up for and that we're doing with one another. So I love that rule.
Yeah,
I do. I take an issue with almost every other rule, though.
Okay, so no dates.
Yeah, and I don't understand that. I don't understand why
sober.
Why dating itself, if by dating she means commitment, if by dating she means must go to his apartment after the date and have sex, then I agree, but that's not what dating is. Dating is an intentional rendezvous with a romantic or sexual agenda. And one of the romantic items on any agenda would be, I'd just like to meet more people and see, what's out there.
Yeah.
I'd like to get to know people, more of them in that way. And so if somebody from my life invites me out for a cup of coffee or a walk along the river, that by definition, for me at least, is a date. And we're both talking and getting to know each other, but it's not sexual. And it's not commitment. And I think that's where, for me, my notion of sobriety would have me go, because I think normal adults engage in social contact, and that getting to know whatever gender you're attracted to, I think is pretty important. I think developmentally that's still an important thing, but it doesn't mean, oh, now I have to compulsively keep dating and dating and dating.
But what if you go on a date? What if you're like, I'm living this sober life and I meet someone, go on a date, and then it goes well. And then you're like, well, now I need to like talk to this person more. And
what's wrong with that?
Because I got stuff to do. Like, it's like, I'm busy, like doing all this like personal self-growth. I have like a full schedule almost. It's like,
I see. So you see yourself sort of like a monk in the Middle Ages, and he's devoted his life to a program of self-improvement. And women are an unnecessary evil that we can jettison while we begin this growth. I would argue that the opposite sex and our relationship with them, our conversations with them, are a vital part of our adult development. Vital. So that having a cup of coffee while talking to somebody for an hour, okay, 2 cups of coffee if you must, that's an important part of our development. And so is going on a walk or going out for lunch or breakfast, or yes, even a candlelit dinner. It's all part of it. But going boy sober or girl sober, for me, I would redefine as saying, yeah, dating is okay, but no commitments. And also, what was the next rule?
No exes.
Well, again, I don't see that necessary unless, again, we're talking about hookups with exes and getting sexually involved with exes, because I think having a truly rational and enlightened conversation with a former boyfriend or girlfriend could be a wonderfully enlightening experience while the two of you are sorting things out, instead of rekindling an old commitment.
But can't that be a way to rekindle a commitment?
It could be.
It's like, oh, hey, let's have a conversation. And then it's like the other person, say, has a relationship. You start talking, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I really miss this person, and they miss me, and they're in a relationship, and now I'm kind of like getting in between their stuff. And
well, okay, so I see in film and in literature a lot of examples of what I'm talking about, and I think of these people as sort of humanist saints in our lives. And if you think of Joseph Gordon-Levitt in his film Don John, he gets together with an ex, Scarlett Johansson, whose character is named Barbara Sugarman. And Barbara Sugarman has really been difficult for him. And they've both had a difficult time, and they broke up and they went away with a lot of anger and hurt feelings. He invites her out for a cup of coffee, which she declines, but she shows up. And there's this scene where he simply makes amends to her. And I think it was a date, and she was an ex, and his making amends to her was, it was a date in the sense of the romantic part of that agenda was to make amends for my bad behavior in the past in a romance. And she wasn't ready for that in the movie. I can almost quote it because I've seen it so many times, but she says, after hearing his apology, she looks at him and says, what am I supposed to do with that? And are we supposed to get back together or something?
Uh-huh.
And he says, no, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. And she is, again, irritated with him and annoyed because she doesn't get it. And she basically, at the end of the conversation, don't ever call me again. And she walks away. But I really felt like, one, he needed to do that. And two, it was the right thing to do. And three, it would have been healing for her if she'd been ready for that. And she wasn't ready for that. But it was a vital part of her experience to maybe being ready someday in the future for a more adult exchange about wrongdoing and the need for making amends and, offering grace to somebody who had made amends. It doesn't mean you have to forgive them, but at least to say, I thank you. I appreciate your apology. Yeah. And then, maybe you become friendly with one another. Maybe you don't. But I just thought, for me, no exes is just, it's a very clean rule, but I think it's hopelessly totalitarian.
But it has to be then that he did it intentionally.
Yeah.
So exes. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, the idea of exes just because, they're familiar and, I'm sure I can get laid if I go out with them. I mean, that's really not what we're talking about, is it?
I think that's what most people are probably talking about.
But if you're going in the context of going boy sober or girl sober, I think so. It's possible to achieve sobriety and still be conversational and still be, social enough to be not only sociable, but to be emotionally open to people growing and wanting to talk about things.
All right. And then what about no hookups?
Well, okay. So there I kind of agree, or I agree for the most part, because a hookup implies that we've been either match made by somebody else or by an app, or we just, two strangers ran into each other and we've gotten together for a night of random sex. And that's kind of the antithesis of everything the article is about. But again, for me, the larger goal is avoiding commitments. So if I get to know someone and I feel safe enough to proceed sexually, for me, I think if I were single, I don't know that I would want to cut off all sex any more than, to use masturbation as a fallback position, which she does in her belated addition to the list of rules. I think going completely without sex, let's say you were going boy sober, girl sober for, let's say 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I think that particular burden of going sexless is unnecessary and ultimately counterproductive, because we do have a need for one another in that way. And what that rule implies is that we'll all be a lot better off if we embrace monasticism or the convent. And if we just go utterly without any sex, we'll achieve some deeper enlightenment. And I think the enemy is not sexual intercourse per se. I don't think the enemy is even falling in love. I think the enemy is we commit way too soon and we get involved. I think it's okay to fall in love. That's a normal human thing over which we are powerless.
Yeah.
Anybody listening to us right now could fall in love with a complete stranger in the next 24 hours. And that's a observed phenomenon that's happened again and again. And it isn't evidence of, oh my gosh, we have a problem here.
Yeah.
It's evidence that, you're a loving person and you see what is truly lovable about others. But it is not, falling in love is not a call for action. I have to get her number. I have to go to bed with him. We have to make a commitment here. It isn't a call to action at all. And I think learning how to have a sense of emotional poise, that it's okay to hold love in one's heart and enjoy that sensation and kind of sort it out. Like, what is it about that person that has me falling in love? What's the secret sauce that has me falling in love with different people? what am I attracted to? For me, that would be part of the intentionality of growing in this way of being sober. So I may be some more puritanical adherents to boy sober would complain because I may be bending the rules too much for them.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, I would suggest, embrace whatever level of self-denial you wish, but all of that self-denial and everything else that we're talking about with going sober, to me, is a means to an end. And the end is ultimately some deep sense of self-knowledge, enlightenment, and doing a better job with one's romantic and sexual life. So repressing my sexual interest, like you might as well say, well, I just avoid looking at pretty people.
Mm-hmm.
I avoid looking at all attractive women.
Yeah.
Well, I don't really think that's all that healthy. I think, it's...
Well, that's not one of the rules, though. That's not...
Right.
That's available.
Right. And that reminds me of that. I have a small button collection, and one of my buttons that delights me is, how close can I get to hell but still get into heaven?
Mm.
So I'm just saying the real sober thing here is not getting lost in romance.
Yeah.
And that's what I see people doing, or getting lost in habitual trying to hook up, habitual scoring sexually where there's no intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
I think the goal would be, I'm going to take a step away from commitment and focus on the quality of the connections. And, one could decide on some additional rule or some easier, more livable rule, like, I'm not going to have sex with anybody unless it is intentional,
mm-hmm.
or I'm not going to be having sex with anyone I haven't dated X number of times, not because I'm trying to make the other person earn it, but I'd like to give myself the chance to really get to know somebody before having sex. And also with the idea that I'm going to let them know that I'm really not interested in a commitment at this time, so that if we do have sex, it's, honorable and everybody knows what they know going in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing I would say with all that, for me, it's like when you do go on dates, like, so for instance, I went on 2 dates in the last
10 years.
2 weeks or so. No, like 2 weeks or so. I went on one yesterday, and then I went on one like a week ago.
Oh, were they fun?
They were in ways. I mean, it was mostly doing what we do here and just talking, getting to know the person. The first person felt a little kind of distant a little bit.
It was hard to connect.
We connected well, but kind of like, she just seemed kind of off, and some of the stuff that she was talking about felt like kind of maybe she was recovering from like a relationship that was difficult.
I'm intrigued because I'm wondering, a second and third and fourth date, if she would just consistently come across as emotionally unavailable, or consistently guarded, or if after giving you a couple of chances, if she would start relaxing and breathing and kind of opening up when she realizes you're not going to be pawing her like some animal.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to continue to see where that goes. But I did that, and then I did another one, and to me, and the one yesterday was good as well. It was nice. Had a really nice conversation, but to me, it kind of pulls you out of that sobriety.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying.
It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And again, I think if you go for 2 years, I think there's some sort of something with timeline here with this idea. And it's like, for doing it for like 3 to 6 months, I would say is like maybe something that is more doable. If you want to adhere to these rules, doing it for a year, 2 years, 4 years, like you're saying, it's like, or 2 to 4 years, I think that could be definitely detrimental to like closing off your needs. But
yeah, it's too much like a cult or a religion at that point, where the rules become more important than the person the rules are meant to serve. So for me, I guess in AA, they talk about sobriety in absolute terms where there's no drinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in Overeaters Anonymous, sobriety has to be defined differently because they realize that food is essential for life. And so they define it behaviorally and emotionally in ways that promote a healthier response to food. And there's room for relapses or a slip, as they say. And then, oh yeah, but you get back up on your feet and you try again. And for me, that's a better model for talking about love,
Mm-hmm.
because I think human beings are hardwired genetically to need love. As a social species, it's what we do. But I don't think romantic love is the only kind of love there is out there. I mean, and I also think realizing that, I can have love in my life and love in my heart for someone, but I don't have to behaviorally jump through the same compulsive level of hoop jumping that I have in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of why I like it. It would be what the article seems to suggest is something more like fasting. If you're really obese, you should just stop eating food for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And you would lose weight for sure, but is that really a healthy refinement of one's relationship with food? And I would say not at all. And if somebody wants to fast, I would get out of their way for sure. And I've fasted for days on end before, but I don't think it's, I don't think the kind of romantic fasting that she's talking about there, going sober, I don't think it's healthy. But having said that, someone like you or anyone listening to this, if you go 2 or 3 months without a date, if that's going to kill you, you've got bigger problems.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think
Right.
I think even going 6 months is worth
Good God,
doing. Well, here's for me.
I'm teasing.
Let me talk about my girl sober for a second. It's like when you're writing a novel, it's like when you're writing the sketchbook and you're pitching agents and you're like 40 years old and you're like in the midst of like, I don't even have like a career established yet. It's like, do I need to can I just take, and I have some things planned. Like I'm going to Burning Man again this year and I'm going to this whole shamanic tantric thing that I haven't told you about, but I'm going to that too. So it's like, I have some,
between those two things, if you can't get laid, there's something you just go and commit suicide. That's,
but maybe at those two things, yes, that will happen. But I mean, in the meantime, it's like writing a novel is like an all encompassing thing. I don't even know, like if I've had, like even being in a relationship when you're writing a novel could be difficult. I mean, especially for the other person, if you're like really in it.
Well, yeah. And I agree. And my own history has given me examples of, I think what you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even more extreme than you've experienced, where the other person becomes my everything and I have to call her every day or spend time with her every day. And
well, yeah. And sometimes if you don't, and even if you are spending time with them, I've been not blamed, but accused of choosing writing over the woman. Like
not being attentive enough.
But it was also me knowing, like, I would say, like on a Saturday, I'm going to write for 2 hours and then the rest of the day we'll spend together. And I thought that was fair and where it wasn't enough.
Right. And I get that. I think, though, for me,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is a really great example of what I'm trying to talk about. I think having a dating relationship with someone like that without a commitment,
Yeah.
gives you the opportunity to be experiencing the pressure when she says, "Oh, how come you're going to be doing that when I want to spend time with you?" And then you get to refine your boundary setting, your defense of your boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
and to detach a bit from her reactivity.
Yeah.
So that if she, pitches a fit and says, "Well, then you're not the guy for me," to be able to open-handedly let her fly and go on with her life while you go on with yours, looking for women who are a little more self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
and can understand and respect your career goals.
Yeah.
Because obviously you're a writer and that is a huge part of your career. And, however that gets defined down the road. And it would be a little bit like, you're dating some artist who works with ceramics or sculpts or paints, and then you are pressuring her to not be in the studio working so that you can command more of her time because you're so needy.
Mm-hmm.
And you would never do that. That's not a thing that's in you to do. And I think that's why I think dating is still a valuable part of going boy sober, girl sober. And I think I've said that enough times that I don't need to repeat it.
Well, one last thing before we wrap this up. I could go on. I mean, lots of good stuff in the article. If you want to read it again, it's called "Going Boy Sober is more than celibacy," and that is from the Washington Post by Anne Branigin. The last thing I will say is, going off the dating thing that you're talking about, is solo dates. And one person, Christy Nguyen, Nguyen, she says when she went boy sober earlier this year, she realized how much she was prioritizing other people's comfort. When she took herself on a solo date, journal in hand, she worried she was making the staff nervous. But she says, I was catering to their feelings about other people. Going boy sober helped her be okay taking up space. So,
well, I love that story that she shared, and I can understand it, because how many of us have been driving along on the streets of our cities and been preoccupied with the mindset of the stranger driving the car behind us. Oh, does he think I'm going too slow? Oh, when he's tailgating, and oh man, he's probably mad. Oh my gosh, maybe I should pull over. And instead, to simply let go of the rest of the world and just be at peace with yourself. And no one owns the roads except, the people. And the people have allowed you to drive. And if he is in a hurry, he can do something about that other than, he can do whatever he wants to do about that. And I think it's important to let other people simply be while you attend to yourself. And you don't have to write in a journal. You don't have to bring a book, but if you choose to, that's certainly fine. But the idea of taking yourself out for a movie or a concert or going to the museum and looking at beautiful art, or even a nice restaurant where you really want to enjoy the food and focus on that, I think that that's a fantastic way to spend one's time and one's money. Mm-hmm. So, the whole idea here, right, in going boy sober in this article is really coming to a sense of peace within oneself. And as Epictetus said, that is the goal of any philosophy, is to bring peace to the inner soul of every practitioner. And so, we need to be comfortable within our own skin before we can comfortably reach out to allow another person into our lives.
Nice. Good way to wrap it up. I was wondering how you were going to do it, but you did it. So cool. So to end, we have a listener question.
Yes, and the listener question.
Yeah, and if you have a question for Steve, visit stevening.com and fill out the contact form. Great opportunity if you have a question to ask a therapist who will answer it on a podcast and to get an answer. So I think
I think the podcast itself is like free therapy, but the fact that listeners can write in any question they want, that adds to the value of the whole notion of free, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like,
So what is it?
Here we go. Hi, Dr. Ng. My husband will not get an annual physical. Classic man.
Right.
I believe he is avoiding having a doctor tell him to lose weight, start eating healthier, and to get some exercise, which would prove me being right about how he's not taking care of himself. And don't even mention getting a baseline prostate exam. He flat out refuses. He also says all men over 40 lose interest in sex. I'm in pretty good shape for my age, and I'm definitely still interested in having sex. Can you offer up a convincing argument for me to say to him?
Yeah, that's a very, very tough question. Tough for me because I like people pleasing as much as anyone. But the problem is, there's him with his attitudes and beliefs and all of that. And maybe like so many guys, he's failing to take good care of himself. And that is a real problem. But the problem is never solved by making his self-care into a control issue where it becomes something where he wins or loses depending on what position his wife has taken. So once something becomes a control issue, including a sex life, it's like, yeah, I don't even want to do it now. Because why is that? Why do teenagers and even adults resist being controlled? Well, even when it's in their best interest, it's because having my own identity is far more valuable than any good, healthy thing you could suggest. So I'd rather die a premature death than give up my freedom and my own identity, my right to make choices, and my ability to do that free of criticism. So I have no doubt that he's making poor healthcare decisions, but it goes back to, for me, Benjamin Franklin's adage about an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. In my own algorithm of intimacy, I think any of us who get together with someone who is incapable of informed self-care has made a strategic error in choosing a partner. And you can only find this kind of thing out by having discussions like, how often do you go to the doctor or the dentist? What kinds of things do you do to maintain your health? And that sort of thing. And oops, she got married to somebody without even considering any of that. And yet those are very, we live in, I think, what is still the fattest nation on earth. And to not attend to informed self-care as a vital part of being a true adult, not just an adult on the outside, but a true adult on the inside. That's really the hard part of life. Being in a relationship, I have countless people who've lectured me on how relationships are a lot of work and they must have all that work in order to be successful. And to me, I would say, no, when you start off with the proper ingredients, two successful adults who are madly, deeply in love with one another and are very compatible, relationships are pretty effortless. There might be a bump or two here and there, but for the most part, it's pretty easy. The hard part is becoming a grown-up. And part of our problem as consumers, whether you're a man or a woman looking around, there's so many attractive people who look like grown-ups, and we irrationally assume, I'm holding my head here, we irrationally assume that they are grown-ups because, they have gray on their temples and a couple of wrinkles around their eyes. And that's just not true. That's a thinking error because developmentally, a lot of older people avoid the very essential parts of development that indicate, we have an adult who's capable of taking care of himself. And that is her problem right here. She has partnered up with a child in the body of an adult. And by, when I say child, I mean, strictly speaking, children, by definition, are in need of adult care. That's part of what being a child means. But becoming an adult means that you've developed beyond that, and now you're ready to share your life with another adult and to have children of your own, whether you choose to do that or not. And I'm sad, it's sad because this could all have been prevented with knowledge. But now she's in this pickle, and she's a bit damned if she does, damned if she doesn't. And it's really hard. Now, here's, having avoided the question this far, let me just add, here's how I would handle it. If I got together with somebody in a situation like this, whether it was they weren't going to the doctor, they weren't getting a prostate exam, or they weren't staying sober in the sense they were abusing substances regularly, I would try to solve it with them as a team, respectfully. I think there's a problem here. I hope you can help me with this because this really makes me upset that you don't take care of this. And then when they look at me and say, no, I'm not going to do anything about that, or, well, you're upset, that's your problem, I'm fine. Then the message is really clear. we're not going to solve this as a team. That means I have the responsibility to myself as an adult to ask myself, is this something I can live with? Or is this simply unsustainable? And that is a very, very difficult question for any of us to answer easily. And I think that that's the question that lies before her. It's not about him, it's about her.
Mm-hmm.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Bam, there it is.
Well, there you have it. So thank you very much for the question. And thank you, Steve. Thank you, Anne Branigin, for writing that article and contributing to that discussion. And we'll catch you all next week.
Bye now.